He drove hundreds of miles from home with one thing on his mind. Police say the trip ended in Maryland with a brutal double murder and a family shattered forever. When officers finally caught up to him, he was sitting quietly on a beach in Florida, as if nothing had happened. Investigators identified him as David. They called out to him again and again before he responded. What they would soon uncover was a crime driven by pure rage. Inside the house that once held a blended family full of life, deputies found a scene described as horrific. Crimea Baker and her boyfriend, Sean Ling, were dead, shot more than 40 times at close range. Their children were inside the home when it happened, forced to hear the sounds of violence that stole their parents from them. Crimea had 3 children from a previous relationship and one with Sean, but he loved them all as his own. Now that family is forever torn apart. On August 25th, deputies arrived to find what the sheriff later called one of the most disturbing scenes of his career. 40 bullets, close range, pure anger. A home once filled with laughter, now silent, except for the echoes of what had just happened. And far away, the man police say was responsible, sat by the water, pretending nothing was wrong, as if distance could wash the blood from his hands.
The sheriff described it as a targeted act of rage, a deliberate double murder carried out with terrifying precision. The victims were shot around 1:30 in the morning while their children slept in nearby rooms. Detectives quickly determined this was no random attack. Whoever did this knew the couple. Inside the house, 4 children were found alive but shaken. They had hidden during the gunfire and waited in silence until morning, afraid to move until the sounds stopped. When daylight came, they emerged to a world forever changed. The investigation turned toward someone from the family's past. Sean was not the biological father of Crimea's 3 oldest children. Their father, David Philip Turner, her ex-husband, became the prime suspect. The problem was, David no longer lived in Maryland. Weeks later, police found him more than 1,000 miles away, sitting on a beach in Florida. Body cam footage captured the moment officers approached. They called his name again and again as he stared blankly at the water. When they finally moved in, he tried to stay calm, but his voice trembled. Officers handcuffed him and read him his rights as he mumbled short answers, pretending not to understand. He said he was staying nearby at a hotel called Largo Mar and that the car parked on the sand belonged to someone else. The arrest was quiet, almost eerie, a stark contrast to the brutal crime he was accused of committing. A man who once shared a family with the woman he killed now stood barefoot on the sand, miles from the home where everything ended.
The arrest unfolded under the scorching Florida sun. Officers tried to keep things calm, telling him to get off the hot sand as they secured him. He spread his feet as instructed while they checked the warrant one last time. The scene was strangely quiet, except for the sound of waves and police radios crackling in the background. One officer spoke softly, saying he appreciated the man's cooperation and that everything would be sorted soon. David seemed confused, asking questions about the warrant, insisting he didn't understand what was happening. He said he was just an ordinary guy, just working, just living his life. But the officers already knew who he was and why they were there. As they confirmed the warrant, one told him he was being detained and likely under arrest. He asked again what it was for, but the answer was simple and devastating. It was for the murders in Maryland, the brutal killings that left 2 people dead and 4 children without parents. He stood on the beach, surrounded by police, a man who had driven hundreds of miles to destroy a family and then fled to the edge of the ocean. His escape was over, and the weight of what he had done was finally catching up to him. The officers escorted him off the beach and onto the walkway, the heat rising off the sand as they spoke in calm, controlled voices. The radio chatter blended with the sound of the ocean. They confirmed the warrant once more as David tried to make small talk, pretending the moment was normal. He joked about working out, saying he used to play ball years ago. The officers humored him, keeping him calm as they led him toward the parking lot. He asked again if the warrant was confirmed, his voice caught between nervous laughter and disbelief. One of the deputies told him they were taking him to the car where there was air conditioning, and then they would call everything in. He said he had seen police a few days earlier and didn't understand why they hadn't arrested him then. The deputy replied that sometimes these things take time and that nothing happens by accident. David nodded, still talking as they walked, pretending not to understand the gravity of what was unfolding. The officer mentioned he usually handled small cases, petty calls, even iguanas in yards. But today was different. Today, he was walking beside a man accused of murdering 2 people in cold blood. The tone stayed polite, almost casual, but the weight of the crime lingered in every step. As they reached the parking area, the officers guided him to a gray patrol car. The sun burned overhead, the beach quiet behind them, and the sound of cuffs jingled softly, a reminder that no matter how far he had run, justice had finally caught up to him.
They led him to the patrol car, promising air conditioning and a chance to cool off. The mood was quiet, but heavy. The officer told him someone would talk to him soon. As they opened the door, the deputy searched him again, explaining it was standard procedure. David nodded, uneasy but compliant, mumbling that the car wasn't his. The officer stayed calm, saying he didn't accuse him of anything, but that he had to be careful. He checked the handcuffs when David complained they were tight, loosening them slightly before closing the door. Sitting in the back seat, David looked lost, staring out the window at the ocean he had been pretending to enjoy minutes earlier. His voice broke through the silence as he muttered that none of it made sense. He said he didn't understand why they were arresting him. He kept asking if the warrant was real, insisting the officers had told him it was still being confirmed. Another deputy told him they would explain everything soon, that the paperwork was on its way. David's confusion seemed genuine, but his calmness felt rehearsed. Behind his quiet words was the echo of what he had done. A long drive of violent rage. 2 lives taken while children hid in fear. Now he sat in the back of a police car, hundreds of miles away, asking questions he already knew the answers to. The heat of the beach was gone, replaced by the cold hum of the air conditioning and the sound of the door locking beside him the moment freedom slipped away for good. He sat quietly in the back of the police car, still trying to make sense of what was happening. He kept saying he didn't know what the problem was. But when the officers finally told him the truth, his expression changed. The warrant was for murder, 2 counts. There was no chance of leaving, no chance of pretending anymore. They took him to the Broward County Jail. The officer beside him spoke softly, almost like a friend, saying he wasn't a judge or a jury, just a man doing his job. David nodded, staring ahead as they walked through the bright hallway toward intake. The air was heavy and silent except for the sound of their footsteps and the echo of the officer's calm voice telling him to follow the yellow line. They took his papers, wrote down his mother's number, and told him they would let her know where he was. He didn't say much, only whispered that he wanted to call her. Moments later, he was processed and placed behind bars, now officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Investigators said that just after 1 in the morning, David had entered the home through a back door. Inside, Crimea Baker and Sean Ling were sleeping in their bedroom when the shots began. More than 40 rounds were fired into their bodies, leaving behind a scene too brutal to imagine. It was a calculated, rag-filled act that ended 2 lives and destroyed a family. The man who once shared that home now sat alone in a cell, his hands trembling, the sound of gunfire replaced by the steady hum of jail lights overhead.
The sheriff stood before the cameras, his voice heavy with exhaustion and anger. He called it what it was, a heinous, violent crime, a targeted double murder fueled by rage that had shaken Frederick County to its core. For weeks, detectives had worked without rest, chasing every lead, determined to find the person responsible. Their break came after traveling to Miami with the FBI to search David Turner's apartment and vehicle. The evidence they recovered was enough to build their case and secure an arrest warrant. The sheriff said David had claimed he was never in Maryland, but phone records, surveillance footage, and travel data told a different story. They had caught him in a lie, placing him in Frederick County at the exact time of the murders. He had driven there himself, hundreds of miles, in his own vehicle, just to take 2 lives. When reporters asked about the weapon, the sheriff said they still hadn't found it. No gun had been recovered, but investigators were searching for anything that matched the caliber of the bullets used in the shooting. When asked about the children, his voice softened. He said they were devastated but physically safe, now staying with family. Their lives, he said, would never be the same. According to court records, David Turner waived his bond hearing and was ordered to remain in custody without the possibility of release. By December, he was extradited from Florida back to Maryland to face trial. The proceedings were delayed when he fired his attorney, but a new trial date was set for the spring of 2026. A man once trusted by his family was now at the center of a case that left an entire community shattered. What began as a night of unimaginable violence would soon move into a courtroom where justice would finally confront the anger that had destroyed so many lives.
Sunny Slaughter, a veteran law enforcement instructor, joined the discussion to analyze the disturbing case. She said it was rare, almost unheard of, to see a murder suspect arrested while calmly sitting on a beach. In her decades of experience, she had never encountered a suspect accused of such a violent crime found simply lounging by the ocean. What shocked her most wasn't just the brutality of the murders, but the audacity of his calm. He acted as though nothing had happened, walking on the sand with his mother while police closed in. When officers confronted him, he seemed genuinely confused, repeatedly asking what the warrant was for. Sunny explained this as classic denial, a mental reflex where guilt hides behind arrogance. Some suspects, she said, truly believe they're smarter than investigators, that their lies or distance from the scene will protect them. Others, like David Turner, convince themselves that if they act normal, reality might somehow bend to their illusion of innocence. The arrogance often collapses only when the cuffs click shut. The conversation turned to the nature of the crime itself. Sunny called it premeditated, cold, and deliberate. A man does not drive hundreds of miles across states by accident. That long drive from Florida to Maryland gave him every chance to stop, to reconsider, to turn around. But he didn't. He pressed forward, full of anger and intent, entered through a back door while his children slept, and opened fire in a fit of rage. 42 bullets, 2 lives gone, and a family destroyed. Sunny said cases like this reveal the darkest kind of violence, the kind that grows quietly in bitterness and explodes without mercy. As investigators prepare for trial, the evidence paints a chilling picture of obsession, revenge, and the illusion of control that ended only when he was caught under the Florida sun, his freedom fading with the tide.
Sunny's voice grew heavy as she described what made the crime so unthinkable. The distance alone, she said, was staggering. A long, grueling drive from Florida to Maryland, hours upon hours on the highway, countless exits where he could have stopped, turned around, and changed the course of everything. But instead, he kept going. She spoke about the mental process of such a journey, how a person has time to think about their children, their family, their past, and what their actions will do to the lives connected to them. Yet even with all that time to reflect, he chose violence. She called the act deliberate and cold, the kind that requires planning. He knew the house. He knew how to get in, whether he found the back door unlocked or waited quietly in the dark for his chance. It was no accident. What struck her most was not only the brutality, but the indifference. There were 4 children inside, 3 of them his own, all under the age of 13. They were asleep when he entered, their lives forever changed in the seconds that followed. 44 shell casings were recovered, along with one live round that never fired. That number alone told a story of pure rage, shot after shot at close range, as if anger itself had taken hold of him. She said it was the kind of violence that left no room for mercy, no trace of hesitation. A man who once held those children in his arms had chosen to kill their mother and her partner while they lay defenseless in bed. It was darkness in its most human form, not a moment of madness, but a decision repeated with every pull of the trigger.
Sunny nodded slowly, her expression darkening as she thought about what the children had lived through. She said it wasn't just the violence that destroyed them, it was the lasting wound that no one could see. Those kids hid in fear while gunfire echoed through their home. They waited in silence until the shots stopped, unsure whether to run or stay hidden, unsure if their own father was the one pulling the trigger. Physically, they survived, but emotionally, she said, they will carry that night for the rest of their lives. No scar on the body could ever compare to the kind carved into a child's memory. She pointed out how much ammunition had been used, over 40 rounds fired at close range, and how that spoke volumes about intent. Every shot was a decision. Every trigger pull was another moment he could have stopped, but didn't. Then he got back in his car and drove away, leaving behind the silence of what he had done. When asked about motive, Sunny said rage alone rarely explains a crime like this. The couple had divorced years earlier, back in 2019, yet the murder happened in 2024, 5 years later. That kind of time doesn't erase resentment, it allows it to grow. She believed Turner's actions came from a mix of control, jealousy, and obsession. Chimera had moved on. She was rebuilding her life, raising her children, and sharing a home with a man who treated them as his own. For some people, Sunny explained, that kind of happiness in an ex-partner becomes unbearable, a twisted reminder of everything they lost. She said it's possible the rage had simmered for years until something triggered it. Maybe a new relationship milestone, maybe seeing photos online, maybe a conversation that reopened old wounds. Whatever the catalyst, it wasn't spontaneous. He had planned the trip, packed his weapon, and driven 13 hours with one purpose. It wasn't a burst of anger. It was a decision, born out of years of resentment and a refusal to let go. And in that decision, he destroyed not only 2 lives, but the innocence of 4 children who will forever remember the night their world ended.
Sunny leaned forward slightly, her tone low and deliberate. She said that when she looked at the timeline, the motive seemed to come down to one thing: control. The couple had been divorced since 2019. In those 5 years, Crimea had rebuilt her life. She had found love again, created a new family, and was raising her children in peace. She wasn't bothering him, she wasn't fighting him, and yet something inside him couldn't let go. Sunny explained that in many cases of domestic violence, control doesn't end with divorce. It lingers like a shadow. For some abusers, the loss of that control feels like a personal humiliation, and seeing their former partner happy without them becomes intolerable. Turner, she said, seemed to fit that pattern. He had lost his family, lost his role, and instead of moving forward, he let resentment consume him. He saw her happiness not as something to respect, but as a betrayal. Sunny imagined what might have built up inside him over those years: jealousy, anger, failure, maybe even shame. She said, when someone like that feels powerless, they try to reclaim it the only way they know how: through violence. It wasn't about passion or impulse. It was about erasing what reminded him of his own weakness. She added that cases like this often followed the same tragic rhythm. Years of silence, then sudden rage when the abuser realizes their control is truly gone. Crimea had moved on, but he hadn't. Her new life represented everything he couldn't have: peace, love, and freedom from him. And rather than accept that, he decided if he couldn't have that world, no one could. It was, Sonny said, the darkest kind of motive. Not just murder out of anger, but murder born from the belief that destroying her was the only way to stop his own pain.
The interview closed on a somber note. Sonny's final thoughts lingered on the unimaginable pain left behind, especially for the children. She said they had lost everything in one night: their mother, their stepfather, and, in a way, their father too. Even though they weren't physically harmed, their innocence had been ripped away. The sound of gunfire, the sight of flashing lights, the realization that the person who was supposed to protect them might be the one who destroyed their family. Those memories would live with them forever. She spoke about how the trauma doesn't fade, it transforms. The children may grow up carrying questions that will never have answers. Therapy and specialized child forensic services would help, but even with professional care, recovery would be long and painful. Some of the kids might have to take the stand, she said, to testify about what they saw or heard that night. The idea of a child recounting such horror in a courtroom, in front of their father, was almost unbearable. Sonny said that kind of experience changes who they are forever. Investigators have lined up more than 30 witnesses across multiple states, signaling the strength and complexity of the case. Prosecutors are preparing carefully, and there's a possibility that Turner might eventually plead guilty to spare his children from reliving that night. But if he doesn't, those kids could face the most difficult moment of their lives, testifying against the man who gave them life and took away everything else. As the segment closed, the host reminded viewers that David Philip Turner's trial is set for March 2026. He remains behind bars in the Frederick County Jail with no bond. The screen faded to black with the haunting truth left behind: a family destroyed, children scarred, and a community still searching for peace in the wake of unimaginable violence.